Hello, my name is Konstantin, I am Ukrainian, and in this video I'm going to continue my journey from glorifying to despising Russia. If you don't understand what this is all about, then I suggest you to watch a few of my previous videos to understand what I'm talking about and what I'm sharing. In this video I'm going to cover my memories when I was 10 to 14 years old. Something might be out of order and something might happen before I was 10 or after I was 14, but in general, these are memories from me when I was 10 to 14 years old. When I was 11, I happened to live in a small town which was by the Black Sea. Right now this town is unfortunately captured by Russian Nazis and it is not possible to access the town. But that was the town where I have got my first ever paid job. We lived in a house which was split in two parts, and one part was owned and used by the house owners, and the other part was used by us. The house owner was an old man who helped his friends and neighbors with fishing. He was too old to go fishing himself, but he was responsible to sort the cargo they have caught. They got different kind of fish and different kind of shrimps as well as crayfish. That's how I got my job, because I helped him with that. Sometimes I could get a little bit of money, but most of the time he would share with me some of the fish and shrimps that they have got to sort. Naturally, as a curious kid, I always asked him lots of different questions, especially because I always loved to talk to old people and ask about the past and just talk to them to hear their opinion and have some discussions. I remember talking about basically everything. He had big nostalgia about the USSR, and he told me about his childhood. His childhood was right after the World War II, so he had access to lots of different explosives and lots of different leftovers from the war. They had lots of fun collecting that stuff and blowing it up. Of course it was dangerous, and of course they have got some casualties among the kids, but I didn't really understand and didn't really realize the scale of destruction when I was 10, 11 years old. I just thought that it was so cool that you can get all of this interesting stuff, but right now I don't have anything of that. These discussions subconsciously formed an opinion in my head that it was so interesting and so vibrant to have childhood during the USSR, and so boring and so pointless and also so hard to have a childhood during independent Ukraine. Still, once we started to discuss difference between Ukrainian and Russian language, and I had a firm belief that I can speak both of the languages, but what he told me was kind of said to me, and at the same time I felt a little bit insulted, because he said that what I'm speaking is not Ukrainian, that it is a mix between Russian and Ukrainian, which was artificially made, and Ukrainian language was banned by Russians. That time I couldn't really understand what he meant and started to argue with him. That's why he started to talk to me in pure Ukrainian. I heard lots of new words that I never heard even though I attended Ukrainian classes in school, and in school everyone spoke Ukrainian. That was a little bit embarrassing to me, because I had a strong and proud belief that I can speak two languages, but then it turned out that I actually don't speak proper Ukrainian. So from that time I started to pay attention to where is Russian, where is Ukrainian, and started to try to distinguish it. He also told me a little bit about how Soviets on purpose removed Ukrainian language from Ukrainians. They tried to merge these two languages and eventually remove Ukrainian language from Ukrainians altogether. He told me how Ukrainian language was not allowed in schools, how it was not allowed in the production line. For example, if you're making some sort of an instruction how to use something or make labels on some sort of equipment, all of these supposed to be only in Russian. Also, they made some sort of reforms to adjust Ukrainian language to be matching with Russian. Some words got completely removed from the language and were forcibly replaced with Russian alternatives, or at least with some words which were sounding similar to Russian and easier for Russian-speaking people to pronounce. Back then I did not understand how important the language is, and I thought that it doesn't really matter. I just felt a little bit discouraged and a little bit sad that I am not speaking the original, the proper Ukrainian language. But right now we can see how important your own language could be. For example, Belarus has completely abandoned the Belarusian language, and right now they are basically occupied by Russians. When I turned 12, I moved from the Black Sea village to my grandmother. My grandmother spoke Ukrainian even though she spent her whole life working in a college where all of them used to speak Russian and Russian only because it was the policy of the Communistic Party. Of course, her Ukrainian was not pure and perfect, and she used many Russian words here and there. Also, television and radio were mixed between Russian and Ukrainian programs, so it was not a perfect Ukrainian environment for me. Still, I heard and used Ukrainian language much more often than I used to in my previous years. That time we still struggled with money, so I had to do at least something to be able to earn some extra penny. That's why I have got myself another job. There I was responsible to crack walnuts and separate the nut from the shell. It was important to keep the nut in the whole piece, or at least in two halves. At the beginning it was a bit challenging, but then I quickly figured out how to do that. During the evenings, after my school classes, I just took a bag of the walnuts, a small hammer, and cracked them one by one. Of course, it was really boring to just sit and do this monotonous work, especially when we did not have the cell phones and the television was really boring. I basically didn't watch it, and we also did not have any sound players or computers. That's why I always tried to talk to my grandmother and ask about the past. Usually she would refuse to tell me the details about the Great Famine and the World War II, but every now and then I got her to tell me something here, something there. The most shocking for me was the Holodomor story, or the Great Famine that Soviets made on the Ukrainian territory during 1932 and 1933. What she told me I simply could not believe, and that's why I kept asking for details. Here I'm going to tell the short version of the story. In 1932 she was a young girl somewhere around 6 or 7 years old, I don't remember the exact age. They lived in a village, and as usual in the autumn they have got lots of food and also they have got livestock. I don't remember exactly how many animals they had, but they definitely had a cow and some pigs. After a while they started to hear stories about Soviet soldiers, so-called special forces NKVD, that they came to each house and simply took all the grain, all the potatoes, and left people with nothing. They grounded their decision that these are strategic reserves which are needed for the country to survive. They did not bother about people who were left without food, they didn't bother about children. And if adults would try to cause any sorts of resistance, they would simply kill them. After a while, people started to hide food from the Soviets. That's why when they came into a house, they first asked, "Do you have any hidden food?" And of course people would say no. And if later on they find anything that was hidden, they simply kill people as liars and betrayers of the national interest. It was horrible and terrifying. People really didn't know what to do, especially because many Ukrainian soldiers joined these special Soviet soldiers and were pointing out where and who might have hidden something. People became desperate and they started to bury food into the soil to be able to survive through the winter. Still, Soviets came with the long pikes and went into the yard and were poking into the soil searching for these hidden places. If they would find one, they would take everything from the hidden place and kill or torture the one who hid and didn't tell about it. People also used different tricks. For example, they tried to hide food in the chimney, but after a while Soviet soldiers figured out this trick, and it was the first thing that Soviet soldiers would check. First they ask the house owner if they have anything hidden, and if they say no, they start the search. And the first place to search was the chimney. After the chimney they would go into the yard and start to poke into the soil to search if there are any hidden buried places where there might be some food hidden. My grandmother also said that Soviets basically didn't touch their livestock. They didn't bother about cows and they didn't bother about other animals. But because they took all the food, it was not possible to feed the animals through the winter, so most of the animals would either die or would be eaten. All of the food that Soviets took from the villagers, they would first collect in one place somewhere away from the village and put guards over there. Some brave villagers would try to sneak through the night and take some food back, but mostly they would be detected and killed in place. Many people got absolutely no food for entire winter, and that is of course a disaster and a great famine. Luckily for my grandmother, her father was a bit smarter than the Soviet soldiers and he dug some food under the walk path. So when Soviets came and started to poke their pikes into the soil, they were not smart enough to poke on the walk path, which turned into a strong soil just like a walking path. They have checked everything in the yard, but they did not find the food which was hidden under the walk path. This little food, of course, was not enough to feed entire family through the whole winter, but it was at least something. She told me that they didn't dare to dig out the food from the stash because other hungry villagers could come and just steal the food, and then everyone would die from the starvation. That's why her parents were slowly digging out one piece by another piece so they could just barely survive without showing the neighbors that they have something to eat. She also told me about horrible things and horrible views that happened in the village. When she walked through the village, she could see people lying behind their houses, being completely dead from starvation, and no one would be able to bury them. She also saw people who were fighting and killing each other for some piece of food. It was really horrible and very desperate experience. She never wanted to talk about it, but when I pushed, she told me a little bit. Her family managed to somehow survive through the winter, but in the spring they have got no food whatsoever. She told me that they were going out and searching for the young grass and just collecting that grass and then chopping it into small tiny pieces and making some sort of a very thin breads fried on a frying pan and eating it. She said that it was extremely hard to digest, but it was the only way they could survive. In total, only according to the official statistic, Soviet Union killed almost 4 million Ukrainian people by creating this artificial famine. And no one told me about it in the school because no one ever bothered to tell anything bad about Soviet Union. Everyone tried to paint a picture that Ukraine is a part, or at least was a part, of a great Soviet Union country. Many people had great nostalgia about the Soviet Union, including my grandmother. As a naive kid, I simply could not put it into my head. One evening she's telling me about these horrible things which were done by Soviets in Ukraine, and the other evening she tells me about her great past working in a college and how good it was under Soviet Union control. Right now, though, in independent Ukraine, everything is destroyed, everything is robbed, nothing is functioning. Even though she told me the story about the Great Famine, she could not make herself blame the Soviet Union for this disaster. I don't know why it is so, and I do not have any option to talk to her again. But replaying the memories of me talking to her, I feel that she was afraid of saying anything against the Soviet Union Communistic Party, because they were taught and they were trained that way, that the only way is the red way, the communistic way, everything else is punishable, you will be captured, you will be imprisoned and put in a gulag. Up until today, Russia does not want to bother about this disaster, even though they declare themselves to be official successor of the USSR and inherit everything good from the USSR. They do not want to take the responsibility for this disaster. They have never paid any contribution to Ukraine, and they have never admitted to have any debts towards Ukraine for this major disaster. Moreover, if you try to talk to the teachers who are teaching history in Russia, or just as some officials, they will blindly deny it and say that it was a natural disaster and not an artificially made famine, even though the entire world announced that it was an artificially made famine to kill and destroy as many Ukrainians as possible. With this, I'm going to finish this video. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.